On April 1st, 1945, thousands of American soldiers gazed across the Pacific Ocean toward their critical target, Okinawa. Dubbed the gateway to Japan, this island was a pivotal stepping stone for the Allies, poised to become the final base before an invasion of the Japanese mainland. For the Japanese Imperial Army, Okinawa represented the ultimate defensive stand, a place where they were prepared to fight to the bitter end. As the largest island in the Ryukyu chain and located just 340 miles from Japan, Okinawa's strategic value was immense. It offered a crucial staging ground for air raids and naval operations that could decisively cripple Japan's resistance. The Allies saw it as the key to victory in the Pacific, the Japanese as their last stronghold against invasion. Operation Iceberg, the largest amphibious assault of the Pacific War, would test the limits of human endurance and military strategy. Over 1,300 ships carried 183,000 American troops, underscoring the sheer scale of the operation. Yet the challenge was daunting. Previous campaigns had revealed the ferocity of Japanese resistance, and Okinawa was expected to be no exception. The operation was led by Admiral Chester Nimitz, the architect of Pacific strategy, and General Simon Bolivar Buckner, Jr., whose steady leadership guided the ground forces. On the opposing side, General Mitsuru Ushijima commanded Japanese defenses with calculated precision, supported by his fiery deputy, General Isamu Cho, whose bold tactics added unpredictability to their strategy. As the battle unfolded over 82 harrowing days, Okinawa would become a crucible of courage, sacrifice, and relentless combat. The outcome would shape the final chapter of the Second World War. The preparation for Okinawa, codenamed Iceberg, was a monumental effort requiring flawless coordination on land, sea, and air. American forces, led by Admiral Chester Nimitz and General Simon Bolivar Buckner, Jr., anticipated a grueling campaign, the largest amphibious operation in the Pacific War. Months of meticulous planning ensured every aspect of logistics, ammunition, supplies, and personnel was accounted for, as even minor lapses could jeopardize the mission. Reconnaissance revealed Okinawa as a natural fortress. Jagged cliffs, dense forests, and intricate cave networks offered the Japanese forces unparalleled defensive opportunities. General Mitsuru Ushijima and his deputy, General Isamu Cho, fortified the southern region into a stronghold centered around the Shuri Line, a web of trenches, tunnels, and artillery positions designed to devastate any advancing force. Unlike earlier Pacific battles, the Japanese strategy here focused on attrition, aiming to deplete American resources and morale. The Allies approached the task with a keen understanding of these challenges. Aerial reconnaissance and survivor accounts from battles like Peleliu and Iwo Jima painted a vivid picture of the resistance they would face. Despite the grim expectations, the troops prepared for what many believed would be the decisive blow to Imperial Japan. Supporting the ground forces was a formidable multinational naval armada, including contributions from the British Pacific Fleet and other allied nations. Aircraft carriers, battleships, and support vessels coordinated efforts to secure the skies and seas, underscoring the global collaboration that defined the campaign. As the invasion fleet neared Okinawa, anticipation mixed with unease. The soldiers aboard spent their final hours in quiet preparation, their thoughts oscillating between hope and dread. Kamikaze attacks, which had wreaked havoc in previous operations, remained an ever-present threat, keeping nerves taut. On the eve of the invasion, the Allies launched a massive aerial and naval bombardment. Bombers targeted suspected Japanese positions with unrelenting precision, and battleships such as USS Missouri and USS Texas joined the assault, their firepower carving destruction into the island. Yet the Japanese defenses remained silent, a deliberate ploy by Ushijima to lure the invaders into a deadly trap. By the dawn of April 1st, 1945, the stage was set. As the first light broke over the Pacific, thousands of soldiers aboard the invasion fleet braced for what was to come. The calm before the storm hung heavy, as Operation Iceberg prepared to unleash one of the most intense and pivotal battles of the war. April 1st, 1945, dawned over Okinawa with an eerie stillness. Codenamed L-Day, it marked the start of the largest amphibious invasion of the Pacific War. Over 1,300 Allied vessels gathered offshore, carrying more than 60,000 soldiers and Marines ready to storm the beaches. As landing craft bobbed in the waves and battleships unleashed relentless barges, soldiers prepared themselves for the unknown, writing letters, praying, and steeling their nerves. The invasion began after a week-long naval and aerial bombardment that turned the shoreline into a smoking inferno. Yet, as landing craft hit the beaches, they encountered not bullets but silence. Soldiers scrambled ashore cautiously, finding the beaches eerily deserted. By day's end, the Allies had secured Kadena and Yanten airfields with surprisingly low casualties, fueling a premature sense of optimism. This silence, however, was deliberate. Japanese General Mitsuru Ushijima had withdrawn his forces to the heavily fortified Shuri Line in the island's south. His strategy aimed to lure the Americans into Okinawa's rugged interior, where dense terrain and interwoven defenses turned every ridge and ravine into a potential death trap. While the Allies expanded their beachhead kamikaze attacks, part of Operation Kikisui struck the Allied fleet with devastating force. Suicide planes targeted warships and transports, setting vessels like the USS Hinsdale ablaze. Fighter planes scrambled to intercept the relentless onslaught, but the psychological impact on sailors and soldiers was immense, a grim reminder of the ferocity awaiting them inland. The first signs of resistance came as American forces advanced. Sniper fire, booby traps, and minefields slowed their progress, shattering the illusion of an easy victory. Seasoned commanders, including General Simon Bolivar Buckner Jr., grew increasingly wary. Major General Roy Geiger, a veteran of Pacific battles, cautioned that the Japanese silence concealed a well-laid trap. By the end of the first week, the Allies controlled much of northern Okinawa, including key positions such as Nago and Motobu Peninsula. Yet the march southward revealed the true scale of the challenge. Rugged terrain, constant ambushes, and intensifying artillery fire signaled the beginning of a brutal campaign. The early triumph of the landings was tempered by the sobering reality of what lay ahead. For the soldiers, the first days were a mixture of relief and dread. They had secured a foothold on Okinawa, but the looming cost of conquering the rest of the island was clear. The battle for Okinawa had only just begun. As American forces advanced southward, the Japanese defensive strategy revealed itself in all its calculated brutality. Unlike earlier Pacific battles, where defenders met invaders at the beaches, the Japanese on Okinawa had shifted tactics. General Mitsuru Ushijima, guided by his fiery deputy General Isamu Cho, orchestrated a defense designed to bleed the enemy dry. Their fortified positions along the Shuri Line, comprising bunkers, pillboxes, and an extensive network of tunnels, transformed the southern hills into a fortress. Advancing troops faced relentless artillery and mortar fire from expertly camouflaged positions, with the rugged terrain amplifying the defenders' advantage. The labyrinth of tunnels allowed Japanese forces to strike and disappear, turning every ridge and ravine into a potential death trap. For the Americans, the Shuri Line was a nightmare of constant ambushes and elusive targets. Adding to the chaos were kamikaze attacks, a coordinated component of Japan's broader defense. Waves of suicide pilots targeted Allied ships, causing devastating losses and sowing fear among sailors. On land, Japanese snipers and infiltrators intensified the psychological toll. Soldiers reported nights filled with sudden bursts of gunfire and terrifying ambushes, their nerves frayed by constant vigilance. One of the most harrowing aspects was the forced involvement of Okinawan civilians. Many were coerced into supporting the Japanese war effort as porters or human shields, while others were used in deadly traps. This manipulation deepened mistrust between American troops and the local population, with civilians tragically caught in the crossfire. Despite these challenges, American forces pressed forward under the steady leadership of General Simon Bolivar Buckner Jr. artillery and airstrikes softened Japanese defenses, while infantry advanced inch by inch, clearing caves and bunkers with flamethrowers and demolition charges. The torrential rains turned the battlefield into a quagmire, further testing the soldiers' endurance. As the battle ground on, the true cost of the Shuri Line became evident. For the Japanese, it was a final stand to protect their homeland. For the Americans, it was a brutal trial of willpower and sacrifice. The battle devolved into a war of attrition, leaving both sides with staggering losses and the island itself scarred by the devastation. The battle for Okinawa unfolded in brutal stages, each marked by pivotal moments that demonstrated the relentless intensity of the conflict. Among the first significant encounters was Kamikaze Ridge, an outer defense of the Shuri Line. Steep ridges, caves, and dense foliage gave Japanese defenders a decisive advantage. Despite relentless artillery and airstrikes, American troops faced devastating resistance, with entire companies pinned down. Kamikaze foreshadowed the bloody battles ahead. Further south, the fight for Shuri Castle became one of the most grueling phases of the campaign. Once a historic landmark, the castle had been converted into a fortified Japanese stronghold. Day after day, American forces bombarded the castle, reducing it to rubble. Yet the Japanese, entrenched in tunnels beneath the ruins, resisted fiercely. The eventual capture of Shuri Castle marked a critical turning point, but came at an immense cost in lives. Amid the carnage, acts of extraordinary heroism emerged. Private First Class Desmond, a medic who refused to carry a weapon, rescued 75 wounded soldiers under heavy fire at Hacksaw Ridge, earning the Medal of Honor for his unparalleled bravery. Stories like his underscored the resilience of individuals amidst the chaos. American tactics evolved to meet the challenges of Okinawa's formidable defenses. Flamethrowers and demolition charges became essential for clearing caves and bunkers, while engineers worked tirelessly to breach fortified positions. Napalm strikes and intensified bombardments added to the destruction, but also revealed the unrelenting desperation of the Japanese forces, who faced dwindling supplies and no reinforcements. The campaign was further complicated by torrential rains, which turned the battlefield into a quagmire. Soldiers waded through mud, their equipment failing and medical teams overwhelmed by injuries and disease. These conditions deepened the misery on both sides, highlighting the brutal human cost of the campaign. By late May 1945, American forces breached the Shuri Line, forcing Japanese defenders to retreat south for a final stand. Each gain came at a staggering price, with entire battalions decimated. The resilience of the Japanese, driven by a code of honor that rejected surrender, prolonged the bloodshed. The key moments of Okinawa revealed the immense scale of the battle and the sacrifices required to secure victory. The campaign tested the limits of human endurance, leaving scars that define the horrors of modern warfare and the resilience of those who endured it. The battle for Okinawa extended beyond the ground, as the skies and seas became critical theaters of war. Allied dominance in these domains was vital to the campaign's success, though achieved at a staggering cost. The coordinated efforts of the Navy and Air Force highlighted the devastating efficiency of modern warfare and the ferocity of Japanese resistance. Leading the naval effort was the U.S. Fifth Fleet under Admiral Raymond Spruance. Task Force 58, commanded by Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher, provided relentless aerial support. Aircraft carriers such as USS Enterprise and USS Essex launched waves of bombers against Japanese positions, while fighter squadrons patrolled the skies, engaging enemy planes and protecting ground forces. The Japanese countered with kamikaze attacks of unprecedented intensity. Known as the Kikusui or floating chrysanthemum, waves of suicide planes targeted Allied ships, inflicting severe damage. Over 1,900 kamikaze pilots struck between April and June 1945, causing catastrophic losses. One of the most devastating attacks hit USS Bunker Hill, killing over 600 sailors in a single strike. For the fleet, the constant alarms and deadly dives created an atmosphere of unrelenting tension. Allied fighters, including F-6F Hellcats and F-4U Corsairs, worked tirelessly to intercept kamikazes, often engaging in desperate dogfights to protect the fleet. Despite their efforts, even a single plane breaking through could have devastating consequences. A turning point in the naval battle came with the sinking of the Japanese super battleship Yamato. On April 7, 1945, Allied bombers and torpedo planes overwhelmed the Yamato and its escort before they could reach Okinawa. Multiple hits caused massive explosions, sinking the battleship along with over 3,000 crew members. The destruction of Yamato marked the effective end of Japan's navy as a significant force. Supporting the ground campaign required an immense logistical effort. Allied supply ships ensured a steady flow of ammunition, fuel, and reinforcements despite constant threats. These efforts kept frontline troops equipped and allowed damaged ships and planes to return to battle quickly. The Navy and Air Force demonstrated exceptional resilience and adaptability throughout the campaign, overcoming relentless Japanese resistance and logistical challenges. Their coordinated actions were not just a display of military might, but a testament to the determination that defined the Allied war effort in the Pacific. As the battle for Okinawa intensified, the civilian population of the island found itself tragically ensnared in the violence. For the 300,000 residents of Okinawa, this was not merely a military engagement. It was an ordeal of survival amidst unprecedented devastation. Entire families were thrust into the heart of a conflict that obliterated their homes, shattered their communities, and turned their once tranquil island into a living nightmare. The Japanese military had long anticipated the battle for Okinawa and sought to exploit the civilian population as part of their defensive strategy. Propaganda permeated Okinawan villages, portraying American soldiers as ruthless monsters who would commit atrocities against anyone who surrendered. This campaign of fear was not just rhetoric. It was backed by coercion and threats. Many Okinawans were forced into roles that directly supported the military effort. Young men were conscripted into the Blood and Iron Corps, trained as hastily armed militias, while women, children, and the elderly were made to dig trenches, build fortifications, and transport supplies under grueling conditions. For the Japanese High Command, civilians were as vital to their defense as soldiers. They were instructed to support the war effort unconditionally, and in many cases, their involvement was far from voluntary. Civilians were used as human shields, placed near military installations to deter American bombardments. The most harrowing tactic involved coercing civilians into suicide missions. Individuals, including children, were strapped with explosives and forced to approach American troops under the guise of seeking help. These tactics not only increased casualties, but also sowed mistrust between the advancing Americans and the Okinawan population. As American forces advanced across the island, civilians were caught in the relentless crossfire. Entire villages were reduced to rubble by airstrikes and artillery shelling, leaving families homeless and desperate. Those who fled sought refuge in caves, only to find that these shelters often became battlegrounds. Japanese soldiers frequently commandeered these hiding places, turning them into fortified positions. When American troops attacked these caves, civilians inside were killed or injured in the crossfire, further compounding the tragedy. The Allies, uncertain of who was a combatant and who was a non-combatant, found themselves navigating an ethical and tactical quagmire. The psychological toll on civilians was immense. Families huddled in the dark, crowded confines of caves, living in constant fear of discovery. Food and water supplies dwindled, and unsanitary conditions led to the rapid spread of disease. Malaria, dysentery, and starvation became as deadly as the bombs and bullets. The breakdown of social order deepened the despair, as traditional community structures collapsed under the weight of war. One of the darkest and most haunting chapters of the Okinawan civilian tragedy was the wave of mass suicides. Under the influence of Japanese propaganda, which painted surrender as a fate worse than death, thousands of Okinawans chose to end their lives rather than risk capture. Entire families leaped from cliffs into the rocky ocean waters below, while others consumed poison or were coerced into ritualistic deaths by the military. Mothers, believing they were sparing their children from unimaginable suffering, killed their own children before taking their own lives. Survivors later recounted the anguish of witnessing these acts, the cries of despair echoing through the hills and caves. Despite the overwhelming suffering, there were moments of humanity and resilience. Some American soldiers, moved by the plight of the civilians, risked their lives to provide aid. Medic stations were established to treat injured civilians, and efforts were made to distribute food and water where possible. These acts of compassion, though often overshadowed by the chaos of battle, were a testament to the enduring humanity that persisted amid the carnage. The humanitarian crisis on Okinawa illuminated the brutal realities of modern warfare, where civilians bore the brunt of the conflict. By the end of the battle, an estimated 100,000 Okinawan civilians had perished, a number representing nearly a third of the island's population. The survivors, emerging from their caves and the rubble of their villages, faced a world that had been irrevocably changed. Their once thriving communities were now desolate landscapes of destruction, and the social fabric of Okinawa was left in tatters. The civilian experience on Okinawa remains one of the most poignant and harrowing aspects of the battle. It serves as a stark reminder of the immense cost of war and its enduring impact on those who find themselves caught in its path. For the Okinawans, the battle was not merely a military defeat, but a profound human tragedy, leaving scars that would last for generations. In the decades following the battle, the stories of Okinawan civilians have become integral to the island's collective memory. Memorials and commemorations, such as the Peace Memorial Park and Okinawa Memorial Day, pay tribute to those who suffered and perished. These remembrances underscore the importance of learning from history and ensuring that such tragedies are never repeated. Okinawa civilians, thrust into a conflict not of their making, symbolize the resilience and dignity of the human spirit. Their suffering and survival remind us of the profound consequences of war, urging future generations to strive for peace in a world too often scarred by violence. As the battle for Okinawa reached its apex, the defenders made their final, desperate efforts to halt the Allied advance. This phase of the campaign was marked by extraordinary acts of courage, tragic losses, and the relentless determination of the Japanese forces under the leadership of General Mitsuru Ushijima. It also underscored the Allies' grim resolve to see the battle through to its bloody conclusion. Ushijima, a reserved and dignified leader, embodied the stoic spirit of the Japanese military. Alongside his chief of staff, General Isamu Cho, Ushijima orchestrated a defense designed not for victory, but to extract a catastrophic cost from the Allies. Their goal was to make Okinawa a lesson in the futility of any invasion of Japan itself. To this end, they ordered their soldiers to fight to the last man and reinforce their defenses around Shuri Castle, the linchpin of their strategy. The castle, an ancient fortress, had been transformed into a virtually impregnable stronghold. Its extensive tunnel systems and layers of interlocking defenses became a hellish maze for the attacking forces. As the Allies closed in, Shuri Castle became a symbol of both Japanese defiance and the harrowing sacrifices of modern warfare. The Allied artillery and air bombardments reduced much of the structure to rubble, but its defenders fought on, their resolve unbroken even as the situation became increasingly hopeless. Ushijima's men executed a series of night assaults, counterattacking under the cover of darkness. These surprise attacks inflicted significant casualties on the Allies, who struggled to maintain cohesion in the face of the fanatical resistance. One U.S. soldier later described these encounters as a nightmare where shadows came alive, and every step forward felt like walking into a trap. On May 29th, after weeks of grueling combat, Shuri Castle finally fell. The victory was a turning point in the battle, but it came at a terrible cost. Thousands of American and Japanese soldiers had died in the fighting, and the destruction left the surrounding area unrecognizable. Yet, even with the loss of Shuri, Ushijima and Cho refused to surrender. They withdrew their remaining forces southward, using the rugged terrain to launch a final, doomed resistance. The last days of the battle were defined by chaos and despair. Japanese soldiers, out of ammunition and food, resorted to desperate measures, including suicidal charges against heavily fortified American positions. These banzai attacks, while courageous, were militarily ineffective and often resulted in entire units being wiped out. For many soldiers, death was seen as the only honorable option. Stories of soldiers using their last grenades to take their own lives rather than be captured became tragically common. On June 22nd, realizing that further resistance was futile, Ushijima and Cho chose to take their own lives. In a solemn ritual, the generals dressed in their finest uniforms and performed seppuku, the traditional samurai act of suicide. Ushijima's final words to his staff reflected his unwavering dedication to his country. "We have done our duty. Japan's honor is preserved." Their deaths marked the symbolic end of Japanese resistance on Okinawa. The aftermath of the battle left the Allies grappling with the magnitude of their achievement and its cost. Over 12,000 American servicemen had been killed and more than 36,000 wounded. For the Japanese, the losses were catastrophic. Nearly 110,000 soldiers had died, along with tens of thousands of civilians. Okinawa, once a lush and vibrant island, was now a landscape of devastation. The Allied victory at Okinawa was a crucial step toward the end of the Pacific War. It provided a critical staging ground for a potential invasion of the Japanese mainland, a prospect that both sides knew would be even bloodier than Okinawa. However, the staggering losses on both sides also influenced the Allies' decision to pursue other means of bringing the war to a close, including the use of atomic weapons. The fall of Okinawa was a testament to the lengths to which Japan would go to defend its homeland, even in the face of overwhelming odds. For the Allies, it was a sobering reminder of the cost of victory and the sacrifices required to achieve it. The battle's conclusion marked the beginning of the end for Imperial Japan, setting the stage for the final chapter of the Second World War. As the guns fell silent over Okinawa, the island bore witness to one of the most harrowing and pivotal battles in military history. The finality of the conflict was undeniable, but its implications stretched far beyond the devastated shores. For both the Allied and Japanese forces, the lessons learned and the consequences endured from this titanic struggle would resonate deeply as the war drew closer to its conclusion. For the United States, Okinawa underscored both the potential and peril of their strategic objectives in the Pacific. The operation's sheer scale, involving over 500,000 troops and countless pieces of equipment, demonstrated the Allies' unparalleled logistical capacity. The ability to organize, supply, and sustain such a vast campaign showcased the maturity of Allied operational planning. However, the staggering human cost of more than 12,000 American lives lost and over 36,000 wounded made Okinawa the costliest campaign of the Pacific Theater. These casualties sparked heated debates within military and political circles over the feasibility and morality of a full-scale invasion of Japan's home islands. The brutality of the battle forced U.S. planners to reconsider their options. Could Japan's mainland be subdued without unleashing an even greater level of destruction and suffering? This dilemma directly influenced the eventual decision to deploy atomic weapons, a choice rooted in the ferocious resistance witnessed on Okinawa. The island had proven that Japanese forces, defending their homeland, would fight with unparalleled determination, prepared to sacrifice every soldier and civilian in the name of honor. The terrifying prospect of encountering this level of resistance on a far larger scale weighed heavily on Allied leadership. For the American troops who fought there, Okinawa brought to light the psychological toll of modern warfare. Reports of shell shock, exhaustion, and post-traumatic stress skyrocketed. The sights and sounds of Okinawa haunted many veterans for the rest of their lives. Stories emerged of soldiers who were unable to erase the memories of screaming comrades, charred bodies, or the constant threat of ambush. Japanese night raids and suicidal charges created a pervasive sense of dread, leaving even battle-hardened soldiers struggling to cope with the mental strain. For Japan, Okinawa represented the tragic culmination of a strategy steeped in sacrifice. General Mitsuru Ushijima and his staff had inflicted heavy losses on the Allies, but at an unthinkable price. Over 110,000 Japanese soldiers perished, with many choosing death over surrender in adherence to the Bushido Code. This grim determination, celebrated by some as a testament to Japan's martial spirit, also exposed the devastating consequences of an inflexible ideology. The loss of so many trained personnel, combined with dwindling resources, left Japan's mainland defenses vulnerable and significantly weakened the empire's ability to resist further Allied advances. The civilian toll on Okinawa was perhaps the greatest tragedy of all. Caught between two titanic forces, the island's residents endured unimaginable horrors. Entire families were obliterated by air raids and artillery barges, while others were coerced into taking their own lives by the relentless propaganda of the Japanese military. This propaganda painted Allied forces as inhuman monsters, leaving civilians terrified of capture. Thousands of Okinawans leaped from cliffs, consumed poison, or took their own lives in other desperate acts, convinced they had no alternative. The Allies, faced with this humanitarian catastrophe, were left grappling with the ethical dilemmas of their campaign. The strategic bombing of Japanese positions, while militarily necessary, had devastated civilian populations. This duality, balancing military objectives with the preservation of innocent lives, became a haunting reminder of war's profound human cost. The Allied forces, despite their best efforts, found it nearly impossible to distinguish combatants from civilians, further blurring the line between military necessity and collateral damage. In the days and weeks following the battle, both sides sought to understand the enormity of what had transpired. For the U.S., Okinawa validated their ability to conduct large-scale amphibious operations, a critical capability in the event of a mainland invasion. However, it also highlighted the limits of even the most advanced firepower and logistics against an entrenched and ideologically motivated enemy. Tactical innovations, such as the use of flamethrowers, naval gunfire, and combined arms coordination, proved effective but came at a staggering cost in lives and resources. The Japanese High Command, meanwhile, saw Okinawa as both a failure and a grim warning. While their forces had achieved their goal of inflicting massive casualties, the island itself was lost, and with it, Japan's ability to project power in the Pacific. For some in the military, the sacrifices made on Okinawa became a rallying cry for continued resistance. For others, it was a sobering indication that Japan's strategy of attrition was no longer sustainable. As resources dwindled and morale among surviving troops waned, cracks began to form within Japan's leadership. Okinawa's legacy was not confined to the battlefield. Politically, it set the stage for the final confrontation between the Allies and Japan. The island became a symbol of both the cost of resistance and the price of victory. Its capture provided the Allies with a critical foothold for staging air raids and a potential invasion, but it also influenced the decision to seek an alternative path to ending the war. The devastation and loss of life on Okinawa served as a somber warning of what awaited both sides if the war continued without resolution. Emotionally, Okinawa left an indelible mark on all who experienced it. Survivors, both military and civilian, carried the scars of the battle for the rest of their lives. Many returned to Okinawa in later years to pay tribute to fallen comrades or to reconcile with the past. For the Okinawan people, the war left a legacy of resilience and remembrance. The island, once a thriving cultural crossroads, had become a testament to the destruction wrought by human conflict, yet its people persevered. In the broader context of World War II, Okinawa stands as a critical turning point. It tested the limits of human endurance, redefined the tactics and ethics of modern warfare, and offered a stark illustration of the devastating power of total war. For the Allies, it was a victory achieved at an unimaginable cost. For Japan, it was a sobering reminder of the consequences of unyielding defiance. And for the world, it serves as an enduring lesson on the human cost of war and the importance of striving for peace. The Battle of Okinawa remains one of the most harrowing and instructive chapters in the history of modern warfare. Its legacy is etched into the landscape of the island, the collective memory of its people, and the strategic doctrines that emerged from the Pacific War. Both a symbol of unimaginable sacrifice and a grim testament to the cost of war, Okinawa's enduring impact shapes how nations, leaders, and citizens understand the balance between conflict and peace. Okinawa's rolling hills and reconstructed cities now bear memorials to those who perished. Monuments such as the Peace Memorial Park and the Cornerstone of Peace inscribe the names of more than 240,000 individuals, military and civilian, American and Japanese, whose lives were lost during the campaign. These sites, tranquil yet somber, invite reflection on the shared humanity that war often obscures. Survivors, families, and tourists gather annually on June 23rd, Okinawa Memorial Day, to honor those who endured the Inferno. Their stories, told through photographs, diaries, and oral histories, remind the world that history must serve as a guide to a better future. The aftermath of the battle reshaped Japan's trajectory as a nation. The near-total annihilation of Okinawa's defenses shattered any remaining illusion of a viable military strategy. With the island under Allied control, the path to Japan's mainland lay wide open. American airfields on Okinawa launched relentless bombing campaigns that crippled Japan's industrial and military infrastructure. Within weeks of the battle's end, the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki brought World War II to a cataclysmic conclusion. However, the devastation in Okinawa played a crucial role in persuading Japan's leaders that further resistance would only invite more unimaginable suffering. For the United States, Okinawa was both a triumph and a reckoning. The battle demonstrated the effectiveness of Allied joint operations, combining naval, aerial, and ground forces on an unprecedented scale. Amphibious warfare, close air support, and intricate logistical operations during the campaign became models for future conflicts. Yet, the staggering cost, over 12,000 American lives lost and countless more wounded, prompted introspection about the nature of war itself. The campaign revealed that even with superior technology and overwhelming firepower, the human toll of warfare could not be ignored. Okinawa solidified a grim understanding that modern conflicts would increasingly demand not only strategic brilliance, but also a commitment to minimizing human suffering wherever possible. The people of Okinawa bore the heaviest burden. Their island, once renowned for its serene landscapes and rich Ryukyuan culture, was left in ruins. Tens of thousands of civilians died, many driven to desperation by hunger, propaganda, and terror. Survivors emerged from the battle haunted by the loss of their homes, communities, and loved ones. The scars of war, both physical and emotional, were profound and enduring. The arduous process of rebuilding began under American military occupation, which lasted until 1972. While U.S. bases provided economic opportunities, they also brought complex challenges related to land use, sovereignty, and cultural preservation, tensions that persist to this day. Okinawa's experience as both a battlefield and a home shaped its post-war identity. For many Japanese citizens, the island became a powerful symbol of the need for peace and the rejection of militarism. The suffering endured by Okinawans underscored the importance of Article 9 of Japan's post-war constitution, which renounces war as a means of resolving international disputes. Okinawa also became a focal point for activism, with its people often leading calls for disarmament and the reduction of foreign military presence on Japanese soil. Globally, the battle influenced how nations approach the ethics and logistics of warfare. The staggering civilian casualties on Okinawa contributed to evolving norms around the protection of non-combatants during armed conflicts. These principles, though not always upheld, remain a benchmark for humanitarian considerations in war. Additionally, the international cooperation seen during the campaign, featuring contributions from nations such as Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the United Kingdom, highlighted the power of collective security and laid the groundwork for post-war alliances like NATO and the United Nations. For military strategists, Okinawa serves as both a model and a cautionary tale. The innovative tactics employed by both sides, including Japan's defense in depth and the Allies' overwhelming force projection, offer valuable lessons in resilience, adaptability, and the limits of conventional warfare. However, the scale of destruction and human cost emphasize the inherent limitations of military solutions to political problems. The battle reinforced the urgent need for diplomacy and dialogue as essential tools for conflict resolution. Culturally, Okinawa has become a profound touchstone for exploring the complexities of war. Artistic and literary works, ranging from films to novels to documentaries, delve into the personal stories of soldiers and civilians, ensuring that the voices of those who lived through the battle are not forgotten. Educational programs, both on the island and abroad, use Okinawa as a case study in history, ethics, and international relations. By sharing these stories, educators and historians foster understanding of the profound consequences of war for both individuals and societies. Today, Okinawa stands as both a memorial and a vibrant community. Its scars are visible in its landscape, its architecture, and its people, yet so too is its resilience. The island has emerged as a cultural bridge between nations, hosting U.S. military bases while preserving its unique Ryukyuan heritage. Okinawans continue to advocate for peace and environmental stewardship, drawing inspiration from their history to envision a harmonious future. Annual memorial ceremonies, peace marches, and educational initiatives ensure that the lessons of the past are passed on to new generations. Okinawa's legacy challenges us to confront the contradictions of human conflict, the valor and tragedy, the innovation and destruction, the resilience and suffering. It reminds us that the cost of war is borne not only by those who fight, but also by those who live in its shadow. For the global community, Okinawa is a stark illustration of both the depths of human suffering and the heights of human perseverance. Its enduring message is clear. While the embers of war may fade, the lessons they leave behind must guide us toward a more peaceful world. The Inferno of Okinawa has long since been extinguished, but its embers continue to glow in the hearts and minds of all who seek to understand the true price of war. It stands as a testament to the profound cost of conflict and the unyielding hope for a future defined not by war, but by peace.